So I am Dr. Amit Kesri, Associate Professor of Neurotology, Department of Neurosurgery, Sanjay Gandhi PGI, Lucknow. So today I will be talking about the management of hearing loss in children and neonates. Everybody has the right to hear. So coming to the anatomy of ear, because the ear is the hearing organ. This is the external ear, this is the axonal canal, this is the pinna, and then we have three ossicles, malleus, incus, and stapes. If there is any problem anywhere in the canal due to wax or otitis media, or in the tympanic membrane or the ossicle, it is known as conductive hearing loss. But if there is any problem in the cochlea or into the nerve, which transfers the sound from cochlea to the auditory cortex, then it is called as sensorineural hearing loss. Coming to the problem of neonates in India. So according to the article published by Sunila Algag and Ritesh Singh, there is 5 to 6 infant, and WHO also say the same, that there are 5 to 6 infant who are born of 1,000 children which are born in India. And if do not have any hearing screening program, they are diagnosed at the age of 2 or more than 2. And by then the irreversible damage has already been done. So universal screening for hearing of newborn is the only way to decrease the burden in India. Then there is another study by Sally K. Chadha in Maulana Azad Medical College that India has very high annual birth rate, 25 per thousand. 75% of population is in rural area, and 50% of birth still occur at home or in small clinics. So the prevalence of permanent hearing loss is 1.61. When you compare this data with the developed countries, it is less than 1. In Brazil, it is 1. In Germany, it is 0.7. In UK, it is 0.6. So our hearing incidence of permanent hearing loss is more in India. Coming to the development of ear, the cochlea, vestibule, and pinna started developing from the 3 weeks onward in the uterus. And by the 20th week of the fetus, the whole of the system developed. So almost all structure developed by 28 weeks. There may be some prenatal problems like CB's anomaly, where cochleosacral dysplasia or Michael aplasia, which means there is absent of any cochlea at all. Mondini dysplasia, where there is a cochlear malformation in the form of 1.5 turns and then interscalar and other associated anomalies. Or there may be enlarged vestibular equator leading to the progressive sensorineural hearing loss. So coming to the infection which may happen in the intranatal period, when the child is still inside the mother womb, and unit is still inside the mother womb, there may be drugs like aminoglycoside, anti-malarial, alcohol, or nutritional, if there is any sepsis or thyroid deficiency in the pregnancy. So intranatal and postnatal factor for hearing loss are, so once we come from the pregnancy, then we come to the postnatal period. So if there is any hypoxia and anoxia at birth, prematurity and low birth weight, especially less than 2 kg is very susceptible. Neonatal jaundice more than 20 milligram is susceptible to have more hearing loss. Birth injuries is, if any, neonatal meningitis, septicemia, time spent in NICU, and ototoxic drugs given to these kids who are in NICU are important. Then the viral infection, measles, mumps, varicella, encephalitis, meningitis, trauma, and ototoxic drugs are also independent risk factor for hearing loss. Then maybe syndromic hearing loss, which associated with syndrome like Wallenberg, Pender syndrome, and other syndromes. So the most important risk factors are greater than 48-hour NICU admission. There is a family history. There is other craniofacial abnormality. Then there is a chances of hearing loss increases. So there is a syndrome I was talking about, maybe Orenberg, Users, Pendert, Waldenström-Elpert syndrome. So there are the syndromes out of which the Pender syndrome and the Wallenberg syndrome has with white forelocks, and it is a genetic disease. These are the, on right side, the Treacher-Collins-Cushing support. These all cause the conductive hearing loss, and this causes the sensorineural hearing loss, which may be progressive also. Why hearing loss is important to diagnose in first 5 years? Because in first 5 years life, language development happen in this age. Deaf children, if do not have any language input, then they become mute. Intervention in this age is very fruitful, and rehabilitation is easy during the age before the child goes to the school. So coming to the normal development of a child, the child cries at birth, pseudo cry at 2-3 weeks, start babbling at 3-4 months, and lalling at 6 months. So if you rehabilitated the child at 6 months of age, there is a very limited language, and the child perform normally to the age peers. Then one word at 1 year, 2 words 2 year. In our Indian scenarios or in the developing countries, we get most of the child at 2 to 3 years of age when the children does not speak at all. So coming to the hearing threshold, 0 to 25 decibel is taken normal. So the hearing loss is not significant. 25 to 40 decibel is the mild hearing loss. So in these two, the language development usually does not affect it. But when you come to moderate and moderately severe hearing loss or severe to profound duration, the language acquisition is impaired, greater degree in severe to profound, and to a considerable extent in moderate to moderately severe hearing loss. This is the speech banana, which is means all the children, if they are in this speech banana, then they develop a normal language. Maybe there will be some delay in some aspect of the sound, in the link sounds, but if we keep the child in a speech banana, so if the child is here, we can give hearing aid and take in the speech banana. So our target should always be to keep the children in speech banana and follow up them if the child has mild to moderate hearing loss. For the severe to profound hearing loss, we need either a high powered hearing aid or we need cochlear implants. So coming to the how we assess the hearing in children. So either it may be otoacoustic emission, which is a screening test, or arousal test can be done. A high frequency narrow one sound is presented in infant for 2 seconds when the child is light asleep to see if the child get up or not. There is also auditory response, cruttle, thumb and limb movement and head jerk. Our respiration, change in the rate of respiration is measured in response to the auditory stimulation. Then coming to the behavioral observation audiometry, which is suitable for children up to 0 to 6 months. Response to the auditory signal result in change of behavior like Moro's reflex, Kolke-Powers and cessation reflex. If the child is doing something, the sound is given and the child just stops. In 6 to 18 months, the distraction technique, child sitting in mother lap, examiner distract the child with the sound. So if the child responds to the sound, that means he is listening. Otoacoustic emission is the mainstay of diagnosis in children and in neonates and children. So they are, what are they? They are the sound recorded by the tympanic membrane and transmitted backward through the middle ear from the cochlea. So cochlea always emits some sound, which is transmitted through the middle ear into the external ear, and that can be picked by otoacoustic emission. The important point here is that the middle ear should be functional. There should be no conductive hearing loss measure, so that the sound which impede the sound to travel from cochlea to the external ear. There are the spontaneous activity, which is not important. There is a transient effect. That means the one sound is given, and then these electrical signals are measured. Or there may be the distortion product. That means the two sounds are given and their interaction is recorded. So this is the equipment. This is a very light and portable equipment, and there is a small insert ear probe which is can be used, and it is can be used in newborn or any child according to the ear canal. And this is an automated machine. This give result as refer or pass. So it is a very good screening test. Difference between cochlear and retrocochlear. The otoacoustic emission are present in cochlear, and if the otoacoustic emission is absent, that means the hearing loss is retrocochlear. That can also tell an entry neuropathy when the cochlear microphonics are present, and but they are absent in middle ear pathology and hearing loss more than 30 decibel. So it is just a screening tool. So why it is an ideal screening tool? Economical, highly sensitive, portable, can be taken to the bedside of the neonate and can be read, and reproducible results. So what should be the protocol of all neonates should be screened at 1 month of age, which is recommended till 1 month of the age, and 3 months we repeat the test if there is any refer, and at the 6th month we start thinking about rehabilitation services. So because you also give some time to the brain maturity, sometime in very low birth weight children, it is a difficult thing to assess all the language and all the hearing with all methods at 3 months of age. So we gave up to 6 months. At a 6 month, so this is also called 0136. At 1 month, you do the screening. At 3 months, you do the confirmation. At 6 months, you do a confirmation again, and you put the child in rehabilitation in the form of hearing. So this is the 2 type of TOA test, which is the difference between 2 is hearing threshold within 30 decibel within a frequency range of, and this is for DPOA is for can test 1 to 6 kilohertz. This can test 1 to 4 kilohertz. That is the only difference. And 30 decibel can be up to 30 decibel can be, but after that not. And this can have interpretation up to 50 decibel of hearing loss. So, but the OAE is not always confirmatory test, because sometimes there may be inadequate probe fit leading to the earnest results. Then sometimes the stimulus intensity may be too high or too low to get a response. Irregular stimulus spectrum, there may be the background noise, and time of testing. OAE failure rate highest in the first 24 hours after birth, and then markedly decrease over next 3 to 4 days. So in first 24 hours, the failure rate is more, but if we do within 72 hours, it is very good response. So that's why when we take children at 0 months of age, then we need to retest at 3 months of age, or there is any problem with the follow-up. Inexperience on combined testing profession can lead to the, so then there is other test is called brainstem auditory spectrum respiratory. Then can also be used of screening, but it is slightly cumbersome to use. It is not very portable. Now the Bera phone is portable, which is available. OAE is highly sensitive. It is highly sensitive, but is more specific, takes longer time, require highly trained personnel, may have artifact, electrical artifacts. Low frequency auditory information is accessible, but here the low frequency cannot be assessed so well, can miss auditory neuropathy and diagnostic auditory neuropathy. So here it is very important that it can diagnose auditory neuropathy, which can be missed even if the autoacoustic emission say pass. That means the cochlea is functioning well, but the problem is from the upstream of the cochlea. Coming to the free field audiometry, these are good for 6 to 48 months of the kid, and the visual reinforcement audiometry, where we show the child some light and then give the noise to the sound to the other side, and then we can see the response. And then in play audiometry, that child every time the sound is made, the children is trained to do a task, and that way we assess the hearing. So the child can be given a toy and to put in the bucket whenever he hear a sound. Coming to the speech audiometry, he can speak of the family. We can tell the child whenever he hear a sound to speak a name of the object or the toy which is kept in front of the toy. So this is the result in free field audiometry which we give. So the child is tested as all frequency. Then we see the hearing at right and at the left. So we take around 50 to 60 decibel is a normal hearing. Then we see whether there is a cooperative response or not, and then the hearing is within normal limit. So this we assess, this has been assessment of 11-month-old child, and this is a normal response. If the child does not respond to 80 and 90 decibel, then we need to do a confirmatory test, OAE and Bera. Coming to the older children, more than 3-year-old, can do a pure tone audiometry, where the child sit in the child or the adult sit in the soundproof room, and here we give stimulus of different frequency from 500 to 8 kilohertz, and the child can respond. So there may be either normal hearing, sensorineural hearing, or the conductive hearing loss if there is a different airborne gap. Here it may be the mixed loss also. So this pure tone audiometry is very good test, but it is subjective. The child should be cooperative, and it is not possible below less than 3 years of child. If we suspect any middle ear function loss, then we do an impedance audiometry, where we put a sound and the sound is reflected from the air in the middle ear, and then we record the sound reflected from the middle ear. So and it create a pressure also gradient. So this is the, it can be ossicular discontinuity, AD type, or AS autosclerosis type, or there may be other problems like fluid leading to the flat tympanogram. So we can find out if the problem is into the middle ear. External ear, we can see the otoscopy, which I'll come to later. BERA is the most important test which confirm the hearing loss. And BERA is a test. We give a sound to the ear, and the electrical signals are taken from all over, like electroencephalogram for epilepsy. So here we see 5 waves, which is from the 8th nerve, proximal, distal, and cochlear nucleus, and olivary complex, and the geniculate body. So we have, and out of this 1, 3, 5 is important, intervalability 3 is important. So you can see here the left there is no response. On the right side we see the response in 1, 2, 3, 5. So this side the normal hearing, this is at 110 decibel, this is at 100 decibel. So we give a suprathalamic signal, and if we get response, we can decrease it. Then there is other test is called ASSR. Then we can find out the threshold also at different frequencies. Coming to the other problems in children, so is secretory otitis media, which is common in children between 1 to 3 years of age and up to 5 years of age, which is due to the adenoids in the nasopharynx. The child have secretory otitis media, and hearing loss. Sometime if it is secondarily infected, then the child can have earache also. There is a delayed and defective speech because there is conductive hearing loss in the tune of 30 to 40 decibel hearing loss, sometimes which may go up to the 50 decibel. School performance may go down of the child. If the skill performance goes down remarkably without any significant change in other environment factor, we should look at the hearing aid. The risk factors are in children, eustachian tube is stated, they have multiple number of upper respiratory tract infection, cleft lip and cleft palate and allergy, and then other syndromic. So the treatment is decongest, anti-allergic, antibiotic, grommet can be inserted, and if required, adenoidectomy need to be done. Then come the chronic suppurative otitis media. It is a sequelae of acute otitis media where there is a hearing loss or the perforation more than 6 weeks after the first episode. So there may be perforation, small perforation or large perforation, which leads to the hearing loss. And CSOM is the whole of the part of middle ear cleft. So it can involve a tympanic membrane, it can involve the ossicle, it can have tympanoschlerotic patch. So it can be either safe or unsafe. So in the safe, there is only perforation. In unsafe, there may be cholesteatoma or a traction pocket. So the treatment here is ear drops, antibiotic, oral toilet, and follow-up of the patients. We do not operate chronic secretory otitis media in children easily. Acute otitis media is another thing which is common in children between 0 to 5 years of age. The child present with earache and sometimes rhinitis. There may be only congestion, or there may be the impending perforation, or there may be said blunging. Sometimes the acute otitis media resolve, leaving the secretory otitis media, which is especially the fluid in the middle ear. The treatment is antibiotic, decongest, supportive care, myringotomy, and cortical musculectomy. In very rare of the cases, if they do not respond and there is a complication after the acute otitis media. So indication of surgery in CSOM below 12 years. In CFDB, it is a bilateral hearing loss, school performance is getting worse, or there is any complication, then the child need to be authorized. Otherwise, we manage conservatively till 12 years of age because of the chances of reinfection and the failure of surgery. But if it is unsafe, how do we know it is unsafe? Polysmelling discharge, greening discharge, if there is headache, vertigo, facial paralysis, any abscess in the mastoid or into the neck, if there is any cholesteatoma or congenital cholesteatoma, or there is a complications of chronic suppurative otitis media, we operate below 12 years. Otherwise, we do not operate below 12 years. We have to also keep an high hearing loss in chronic kidney disease in small children. Mumps cause unilateral, but sometimes can bilateral, post-viral. Meningitis is very, very important. All children who suffer from meningitis should have hearing assessment within 3 months of the recovery of the meningitis, because the ossification of the otic capsule can be fast. Tuberculosis because of the drugs, noise trauma, chemotherapy. And coming to the cerebral palsy, brain tumors, sometimes CP angle tumors can cause autoimmune diseases. Otosclerosis is seen in second decade, but sometimes can also be seen between 10 to 15 years of age. So coming to the CSOM, what surgery we do is we remove the disease and then reconstruct the hearing loss. So here we can see that we have a retraction pocket here with a small cholesteatoma, which is lateral to the ossicle. We removed and all ossicles are normal. So we just reconstruct the scutum and then we restore the hearing and we remove the disease. Sometimes the ossicles may be necrosed, then we use partial ossicular reconstruction processes or total ossicular reconstruction processes of titanium or Teflon. And then we reconstruct the scutum with a piece of cartilage so that the retraction pocket or cholesteatoma does not come again. There will be other miscellaneous problems like retraction pocket, otomycosis, which may lead to the hearing loss, but most of the time they are unilateral, but maybe bilateral also. This is important, that is an intact tympanic membrane. There is a cholesterol pearl behind the tympanic membrane, which is known as congenital cholesteatoma, or there may be tympanous sclerosis with perforation also. This is the wax. Wax is the very common cause of hearing loss in children. Wax is genetically determined. Sometimes it may be very hard to remove, and the hard wax, if not removed, can lead to hearing loss of a significant degree if it is bilateral and occupying whole of the canal. Coming to the sudden hearing loss, the child may be normal, but he can acquire hearing loss due to the sudden hearing loss. This is defined as greater than 30 decibel hearing loss at 3 frequency within 3 days. The most common cause is viral infection, trauma, vascular, autoimmune, and neurological. It is a medical emergency, and we generally give oral steroid. The results are very good in within 72 hours. So whenever a child complains that I am not hearing from the one side, the parents should consult a doctor to get it treated. If does not respond to the oral steroid, we give intratympanic steroid. Antiviral medications are doubtful in these cases. So sensory hearing also is nerve deafness. Typically occurs when the part of inner ear, the hair cells are damaged. So we are talking about the conductive deafness, which can happen. It is mostly due to the wax in the frontal canal. Earlier we were talking about, or in the chronic otitis media, or secretory otitis media, or the ossicular chain necrosis, or otosclerosis. But the sensory hearing loss, it is generally known as nerve deafness, which is due to the problem in the cochlea or into the nerve or into the pathway to the auditory cortex. So most of the common cause of sensory deafness is the loss of hair cells. Hair cells may decrease in numbers or into the signal processing. So despite the term nerve deafness, the hearing nerve trunk rarely damaged. It is mostly the hair cells which is damaged, which is located inside the cochlea onto the basilar membrane. When the hair cells are damaged, they are unable to send information to the hearing nerve. So the part of the function of the cochlea is to convert the sound energy, which is mechanical energy, into the electrical energy. So if the sound is converted from mechanical energy by the help of the hair cells, if the hair cells are damaged, then we cannot send the information to the nerve and auditory cortex. So what is the solution of the sensory hearing loss? If it is mild, moderate to severe, then the hearing aids are very good. We should use the hearing aid. Along with the hearing aid, we have to give speech therapy to the children, especially if they have not learned the language and they are between 0 to 3 years of age. It is very especially for development of language in prelingual deaf and perilingual deaf. So prelingual means they have not heard anything before the birth and they have not developed any language. Perilingual means in the 0 to 5 year, there was some hearing loss, which is progressive. And now the child is not able to hearing. So he has some exposure to the language and some limited language developed. So what is the solution if the hearing aid does not work? If the hearing aid does not work in prelingual children or in the perilingual children, or even for the postlingual adults also, then the cochlear implants, which is also known as bionic ear. So it has got two components. The one outer component is the speech processor, and through the transmitter, electromagnetically it transmits to the transcutaneously to the inner device, which we will just show in the front. So what is the indication of cochlear implantation? So cochlear implantation is indicated for children about 12 months of age. It's in 1999. Currently, the children are of any age above 12 months are operated. We have now decreased it to 9 months. We are not operating child below 9th month because of the various factors, and the US FDA approval is for meningitis or some urgent cases. Then we operate below 9 months. So the best time is to operate between 1 to 3 years of age, but the best is closer to 1 year, where the normal development happens. And the suitable for implant are 3 to 7 years. But here we have to see that there is some language or not, but the results will not be like a normal hearing children. Sometime in progressive and acquired losses, we can go up to 7 to 10, but the case is very less. We do a functional MRI and see if the child is eligible because of the atrophy of the auditory cortex and the brain plasticity, which set in till the 5-year age. We usually try to operate between 1 to 3 years, at the maximum 5 to 6 years. So what is the benefit of early implantation? Children implanted before age of 5 has better open set recognition score. Children implanted prior to 2 years has significantly faster rest of receptive language. So that's what I'm saying, that they should be operated between 1 to 3 years. The closer to 1 year, it is the best results. And implanted during preschool exhibit higher speech processing. So the child generally goes to the play school at 3 years of age. So if you rehabilitate before that, it's good. And children implanted under age of 18 months is the best outcome in terms of language acquisition. Then the children implanted at 30 months. So the rate increases, the language deprivation is more, and there is a brain plasticity set in. So what is a cochlear implant workup? When we plan, we first try the children with the surgery, if it's possible, if it is a conductive component, or with the drugs. If not, then we provide a hearing aid. If there's not hearing, then we do a cochlear implant. So we do auditory assessment, which I already talked about, OAE, BERA. We do CT scan and MRI to see that all cochlea is normal, the nerves are normal in MRI, and there is no major any intracranial abnormality. IQ assessment is done to know the development of the child, the brain development of the child. We see that there is no signs of autism or cerebral palsy, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and also do cardiac evaluation, especially for syndromic patient. And we have to see that this is not a case of auditory neuropathy spectrum disorder, where the OAE will be present and the BERA will be absent. We also see the vaccination history, and if we plan the surgery, we do pre-anesthetic checkup and all routine investigation, blood investigation for any surgery. So what is the cochlear implant surgery? A pediatrician and ENT surgeon with a special interest in otology, because these are a small children, we have to diagnose hearing aid, we need to be sure, and there may be sometimes special other things associated with the hearing loss. There should be a counselor who break the news to the parents that a child is not hearing and what are the options available, because it is mentally very depressing for the children, for the parents, when they know the child is not hearing. Then CI surgery, post-op follow-up. There should be a very good pediatric audiologist to diagnose the hearing loss, which can interpret all the results. Then selection of hearing aid, we have to see if we give hearing aid for 3 to 6 months, at least minimum 3 months, to see that the children are responding well with the hearing loss or not. Then if we plan an implant, then we also think about device selection. Post-op therapy should be available, because without therapy, the implant does not work, and the mapping facility should be available at the center. So it is a team approach. Pediatrician, child close surgeon, audiologist, we refer from one place to other, or from the other wherever is a problem. So the ideal candidate should have a severe to profound hearing loss, not benefited with hearing aid, have a functioning auditory nerve, have good speech, language, and communication skill in case of infant and young children, having no medical reason to avoid surgery. So this is an ideal candidate for the cochlear implant. This is the incision which we give in our institute. This is an indoral incision. So you can see that it's a mark. It is around 2.5 centimeter incision. Then we make posteriorly braced flat. I will come to this in the surgical video. Then we made a indoral incision is extended inside into the external layer, and then we open the middle layer. The internal steps are same as step surgery. We give a step wound, we elevate the TM flap, we identify the chorda and the IS joint, and then this is the round window, which is our area of interest. This is the round window, can be seen very well. So then implant bed is done, implant is fixed. This is the implant device. This is the internal component. This is a receiver stimulator. This is antenna, and there is a magnet to hold the external device in place. So this is the technique. We make a hole posterior to the tunnel, posterior to the posterior canal wall, with the help of Trifon perforator. And then the TM flap is and the closure is done. So I will just show a small video of the cochlear implant, which is done at our. There are two methods. One is classical and the Varia technique. We follow the Varia technique. It can be either dull, indaural, the post-oral. So this is the cochlear implantation, which is done. I will first show the endural approach. So then incision is made, which is taken from the incisora. It is very in the vascular plane. We do not cut the arteries. So then we place the device where we wish to place. Incision is, skin is incised. And then this is the periosteum, anteriorly based periosteum flap, posteriorly based skin flap, Wolfsburg flap. Then we identify the area to where the bed is made. This is the incision at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock. Then they are mixed, just like the Steffi's surgery. We elevate the TM flap. So TM wave is elevated till the middle layer. And undermining of the TM flap is very important to prevent any tear of the tympanic membrane. So this is, so once you enter the middle layer, we identify all the structures. So like you can see that this is a chorda tympani. And then we, round window is already seen. Then we, posterior canal is still strengthened. Then we make a bed for the receiver stimulator and connect this with the suprameatal well. So suprameatal well is for extra electrode. And through this suprameatal well, it should be like a well. So it is outer side is small and inner is. Then we use a Trifon perforator to make a tunnel parallel to this, which start from the 11 o'clock and come out of the 9 o'clock. So this is the pathway which open into the facial recess area. Then we do a cochleostomy, if it is a cochleostomy, or we do extended round window in the round window. So here it is extended round window technique. So we are removing the superior lip and the interior of the round window. So then the round window can be seen very clearly. It has been opened now. You can see the round window is scala tympani. And in the cochleostomy, we just drill anterior and little inferior to the round window. So this is a case of cochleostomy. So the cochleostomy has been done, and we can see the scala tympani very well through the cochleostomy. And then the device is fixed. We already fixed the device. The device is fixed. The active electrodes are then passed through the tunnel and into the scala tympani. Scala tympani is the place where we get the optimum stimulation of the electrode. So with the free hand, it is done. And then this is the electrode in place. Extra electrode is housed here. So here we don't do a musculotomy, and then we stitch. This is the first layer closure of the muscle periosteum, and then this is second layer, the subcutaneous closure. This is after the complete closure. Then the post-oral incision can be done. The same thing is done with the post-oral incision. And you can also use the electrode array, especially if the electrode array is also pre-curved electrode array, we can also use that. So this is the post-oral. Post-oral technique can be also used. So in the post-oral, this is the same thing. Is a suprameatal well is here, and then we can make. So this is the left side. So in the left side, we start from the superior part and then go into the inferior part, and we just came out into the middle layer. So this is the opening which is made, and then the electrode can be inserted. So with the help of this, we just into the cochlea. So even the electrode which are pre-curved, like contour advanced electrode, can be done through this technique, the Verrier technique. And this is a small video. So where we just do the freehand, so that this is the white mark, which can be seen now. After the white mark, we take two forceps, and the one forceps, this is called a two forceps technique. So in the one forceps, we hold this stellate. So the one forceps is holding this stellate, and the other forceps is just advancing the electrode over the stellate. So we can see that it is a complete insertion has been happened even in the pre-curved electrode. So in, coming to the implantation otology, this is the cochlear implant, which are there are other for the conductive hearing loss where you cannot do the surgery, or the external canal has been not developed, like microsia. So this is a called this is a transcutaneous device, which is BAHA, and this is called percutaneous device, which is vibrant sound bridge. So they work on the principle of bone conduction, and bone conduction, because we know that the cochlea is a bony structure and is connected to the skull. So when they vibrate this, the cochlea pick up the vibratory signals and then process it. Here it is mainly used for the conductive hearing loss and sometimes for the mild mixed hearing loss. So thank you. With this, we cover all the aspect of the hearing loss in children. What are the causes of the hearing loss? What is the what is the diagnostic test we need to do? What is the management options? And what are the varied signs and symptoms? And how do we manage the cases of hearing loss in children in our institute? So I thank you. If there is any questions and comment, I can be reached at my email ID, which is amitk2000@yahoo.com. You are welcome for all the questions and suggestions, if any. Thank you very much.